Once upon a time, those 4 words were never meant to lull you to sleep. They were crafted to awaken something ancient, primal, and unspeakably real. A spell not of comfort, but of confrontation. A doorway not into fantasy, but into the dark corridors of the psyche itself. You've been lied to. They told you fairy tales were for children, but they were never meant for innocence. They were maps for the soul, written in metaphor, blood, and memory. You were fed the sanitized version. The princess in the tower, the brave knight, the happy ending. But what they cut out, what they buried, was the code, the dark code, the encrypted truth hidden in archetype, shadow, and symbol. They didn't want you to read the real story, because if you did, you'd stop playing the part they gave you. You see, every fairy tale is a mirror, but it doesn't reflect your face. It reflects your inner world, the war between your light and your darkness, the lost pieces, the repressed desires, the unhealed wounds. Carl Jung saw this clearly. He knew these stories weren't stories at all. They were mythic blueprints, psychic roadmaps, symbols designed to activate you. And what happens when you start to see the code? You stop romanticizing the damsel. You stop idolizing the knight. You realize the dragon was you all along. This is not a bedtime story. This is an awakening, because somewhere along the line she stopped waiting for the prince. She stopped brushing her hair by the window. She broke the mirror. She burned the tower. And in the ashes, she uncovered something that terrified the world. A woman with nothing left to lose and nothing left to pretend. The fairy tale wasn't about rescue. It was about initiation. They never told you that the forest was a metaphor for the subconscious, that the wolf was your primal instinct, that the witch was your intuition twisted into villainy because it couldn't be controlled. They never told you that happily ever after was the death of the transformation, because the real transformation, it happens in the dark. The girl who walks into the woods never returns as the same person. She sheds her skin. She faces the devourer. She dies symbolically so she can be reborn in truth. And what is truth? Truth is the moment she realizes no one is coming. Not the prince, not the fairy godmother, not the 7 dwarves. Only her naked, cracked open, trembling with rage and reverence. She understands now every fairy tale villain was a misunderstood archetype. The stepmother unprocessed resentment. The cursed hag disowned power. The sleeping spell generational trauma that kept her silent. But silence no longer protects her. She starts to remember. The code isn't outside, it's inside her. And once the symbols unlock, she doesn't just tell a new story. She becomes it. She becomes the wild woman, the hunter, the serpent, the queen. She becomes her own myth. Not a myth for children. A myth for the woman who buried herself to survive and is now clawing her way back with blood on her hands and a fire in her voice. This is Syphoria, the ecstasy and terror of seeing yourself without the veil, the disintegration of false innocence, the collision between the psyche and the soul's rebellion. She doesn't run from the shadow anymore. She dances with it. She invites it in because she knows what Jung knew. The shadow, when recognized, is the doorway to power. And power doesn't come with crowns or weddings. It comes with the courage to feel everything you've repressed. She enters the castle, not to be wed, but to burn it, to burn the lies, to melt the golden cage. Because here's what no one told her. The happy ending is the lie. The real story begins after the credits roll. It begins when she looks around and realizes there's more than survival, more than roles, more than this hollow mimicry of a life. She was never meant to be ornamental. She was meant to be dangerous. And danger doesn't mean destruction. It means awakening. It means threatening the structure of anything that relies on her staying small. When she stops playing innocent, she becomes free. And freedom is not soft. It's ruthless. It's terrifying. It's raw. It's the look in her eyes when she decides She doesn't need to be liked, doesn't need to be saved, doesn't need to be understood. She needs to be sovereign. And that begins with mindset, not the shallow version of mindset sold in motivational books, not think positive or manifest your destiny, but owning the architecture of your perception, learning to see where the story has been implanted in you, where you were taught to betray yourself just to fit in. She rewrites that line by line, thought by thought. She reclaims her voice from the narrator that was never hers, the one that said, be nice, be pretty, be chosen. She deletes those lines with a single command, be whole. And wholeness requires darkness. It requires sitting with the wolves. It requires looking into the mirror and saying, I see you, I will not run. The mirror was never the enemy. It was the test. The mirror doesn't show flaws. It shows truth, unedited, unforgiving, unyielding. And if she can look at that, at her rage, her lust, her grief, her hunger, and not flinch, she wins not the fairy tale, but herself, her life, her legion. She no longer needs belief to be fed to her. She becomes the belief, she becomes the symbol, because belief is not repetition. Belief is action. Belief is sacrifice. Belief is blood on your hands and forgiveness in your bones. And clarity? Clarity is what comes after the storm, not before. Clarity is not handed to her by a wise old sage. It is forged in the fire of her own confusion. It is what remains after everything false is burned away. And what remains is vision, not fantasy, not escape, but the terrifying possibility of a life lived in full alignment. And that vision haunts her, because once you've seen the truth, you can't go back to pretending. Once she saw who she could become, the old world felt like a prison. The dress didn't fit. The script sounded hollow. The prince seemed small. She didn't need a savior. She needed space to become, to unravel, to evolve, to burn. So she set the match to the illusion and watched it turn to ash. Because sometimes evolution isn't gentle. It's not soft or quiet or poetic. Sometimes it's violent. Sometimes it's loud. Sometimes it's the scream that rips through her ribcage when she realizes she gave her life to a story that never saw her. And in that scream, she is born. She doesn't rise like a queen. She rises like a storm, not wearing a crown, but carrying a sword made of her own spine. Because vision without action is delusion. And she is done dreaming with her eyes closed. She dreams now by building, by moving, by choosing. Every breath becomes a ritual, every decision a spell, every step sacred. Not because she's seeking magic, but because she is it. The old self is gone, and she does not grieve it. That self was never hers to begin with. It was sewn together from expectation, fear, obedience, silence. This new self, it is jagged, it is raw, it is real, and it walks not with arrogance, but with purpose. Purpose not given, claimed. She doesn't find purpose in titles or trends. She finds it in the mirror, in the rage, in the tears that won't fall, in the sacred silence between heartbeats where she finally hears the voice beneath the noise. You were born for more. Not more success, not more fame, more truth, more depth, more presence, more you. That is purpose. To live so fully in your essence that your presence is a revolution. To live with such ruthless alignment that compromise feels like violence. And that purpose demands discipline. Not the discipline of punishment, not the cold rigidity of shame, but the fierce sacred discipline of devotion. Devotion to your higher self. Devotion to your craft, your path, your inner fire. Devotion to not betraying yourself again. She wakes before the world, not to grind, but to listen. She moves with intent. She speaks with weight. She holds herself like she matters because now she knows she does. And the world begins to notice not her makeup, not her clothes, not her curated smile. It notices her gravity, her refusal to shrink, her unwillingness to play roles, her ability to sit in a room and command it without ever raising her voice. That power, it didn't come from books, or likes, or outside approval. It came from war, from walking through her own hell and choosing to come back whole. And still, she is grateful, not for the pain, but for what it revealed, for who it forced her to become, for the parts of her it shook loose and demanded she finally face. Because gratitude isn't softness. It's not blind positivity. It's not pretending things are fine when they're not. Real gratitude is reclamation. It's looking back at your wreckage and saying, I'm glad it broke because I was never meant to fit inside it. Gratitude is recognizing that every betrayal was a redirect. Every silence was a signal. Every fall was a forging. And now, forged in fire, she is adaptable, not bendable, unshakable, because she knows who she is beyond titles, beyond chaos, beyond identity. She's no longer afraid of losing because she's already lost everything false. What's left is unbreakable. She does not fear the unknown. She is the unknown. She is what happens when a woman remembers who she is beneath the programming. And that kind of resilience, it isn't taught. It's earned in silence, in solitude, in that sacred moment when you choose to rise, not because you're ready, but because you're done waiting. And once you rise, you learn, not from textbooks, not from gurus, but from your own blood, your own sweat, your own sacred unraveling path. Because true knowledge isn't memorized, it's embodied. It's how she moves now, with history in her bones and mystery in her eyes, with the weight of every woman who came before her, and the light of every woman who will come after. She is no longer a character in a story she didn't write. She is the author, and she's writing in ink made of thunder. No more fairy tales, no more cages, no more silence. She has the code. She is the code, and the world will never be the same. Because when one woman rewrites her myth, she doesn't just free herself, she cracks the code for every soul bound by the same illusion. She becomes the rupture, the forbidden page, the glitch in a system that fed on her silence for generations. She doesn't scream to be heard anymore. She speaks in frequencies the old world can't decode. Every word she utters is a key. Every move she makes, a portal. Every truth she lives, a revolution. And they'll try to label her. They'll say she's too much, too intense, too emotional, too masculine, too wild, too free. But too much is what the system fears most. Because too much is the return of wholeness. And wholeness is impossible to control. She doesn't need to burn down the world. She just needs to stop lying. She just needs to live so fully in her truth that everything falls around her shatters. She walks through boardrooms, churches, relationships, and ancestral wounds, not to conform, but to consecrate. She's not here to win in the old game. She's here to end it and birth something that cannot be measured in profits or praise. Something ancient, something holy, something real. This is the return of the dark feminine, not darkness as evil, darkness as depth, as mystery, as power that was once buried beneath centuries of obedience. She no longer seeks the light like a prisoner. She carries it inside her gut, behind her eyes, in the fire that never went out, even when the world said she should. She is a paradox, the nurturer and the destroyer, the oracle and the outlaw, the priestess in combat boots, the mother who births herself. And now that she has returned to herself, she will not leave again. She doesn't shrink for safety. She doesn't dim for comfort. She doesn't settle for silence. She builds temples in the wreckage. She turns every wound into a weapon of awakening. She carries the dark code in her body, not as a burden, but as a blueprint, because she knows now every fairy tale was a cipher, a test, a training ground, a map back to her deepest self. And she followed it, through betrayal, through exile, through the aching silence of forgetting. And now she remembers, not who the world told her to be, but who she was before the world got to her, before the shame, before the grooming, before she learned that to be good, she had to be small. She is no longer interested in being good. She's here to be goddamn true. And truth, in its rawest form, is terrifying, not because it's wrong, but because it can't be tamed. She is no longer a seeker. She is a seer. She no longer waits for the signal. She is the signal. Her life is no longer a reaction. It is a declaration. Every breath, a boundary. Every step, a decision. Every heartbeat, a war drum. She's not just living a new story. She's living beyond story, outside genre, outside the binary, outside the narrative trap. She is a myth reborn in flesh, not to entertain, not to perform, but to remind every woman still stuck in the tower, still gagged by politeness, still cutting herself down to be loved, that the door was never locked. It was just guarded by fear. And fear is what she eats for breakfast now, because the code was never broken. It was buried. And she dug it out with her own hands. Now she wears it like armor. She wields it like thunder. And she speaks it, not in words, but in presence. So when she walks into the room, something shifts, not because she demands it, but because the lie can't survive next to her truth. She has nothing to prove. She just island. And in a world built on pretense, being real is the most dangerous thing of all. She no longer plays by the rules, because she finally understands the rules were written to keep her asleep, to keep her tame, to keep her grateful for her cage. But now she builds her own game, her own rhythm, her own throne, not a throne perched above others, but one rooted in the soil of her authenticity, a throne built from the bones of everything she was told to kill inside herself. She sits on it, not to dominate, but to illuminate, because real power doesn't flex. It emanates. And that's what she's become, an emanation, a signal that says, I have returned from the underworld. I've danced with my demons. I've kissed my shadow. And I am no longer afraid of the dark, because I am it. She has stopped waiting to be chosen. She chooses herself, daily, ruthlessly, devotionally. She has stopped searching for belonging in places she had to betray herself to fit, because belonging without wholeness is just self-abandonment dressed in approval. Now she walks into every space as if she belongs there, because she belongs to herself. And that changes everything. You cannot manipulate a woman who knows her worth. You cannot seduce her with breadcrumbs when she bakes her own bread. You cannot tame her with shame when she's already forgiven herself. And when others try to box her in, with labels, with judgment, with fear, she just smiles, because she knows they're not seeing her. They're seeing the ghost of the system they still serve. She's not here to convince anyone. She's here to remind the few who feel the same sacred fire. You are not crazy. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are awakening. And yes, it will cost you. It will cost you comfort. It will cost you approval. It will cost you the love that only existed when you played small. But what you gain is everything, because this isn't about rebellion for the sake of it. This is resurrection. This is the girl who died to become the woman who burned to become the force who speaks not just for herself, but for every silent story buried in the bones of her bloodline. She carries their voices now, their prayers, their rage, their unfinished sentences. And she doesn't carry them like a burden. She carries them like a torch. Because the dark code wasn't just meant to awaken her. It was meant to awaken you. This is not a fairy tale. This is the raw gospel of your return. You who have felt out of place your whole life. You who have known in your bones that something is wrong, not just out there, but in here. You who have watched yourself become a stranger, just to be loved. You're not broken. You're coded. And that code, it's not made of logic. It's made of myth. It speaks in archetypes and symbols. It activates through poetry, pain, and presence. And now you've heard it. Now you feel it. The pulse behind your ribs, the tremor in your gut, the part of you that rises when your mind says, sit still. Don't silence it again. Don't dress it up. Don't filter it to be palatable. Let it roar, because your return doesn't need to be graceful. It needs to be true. Let the world adjust to your rhythm, or fall away. Let the old stories choke on their irrelevance. Let the tower crumble, because the only thing that matters now is that you remember who you are. And when you do, you'll stop searching for the path, because you are the path. You always were. You always were the path. The forest wasn't a trap, it was an invitation. The curse wasn't punishment, it was prophecy. The fall wasn't failure, it was initiation. Every betrayal, every silence, every time you bit your tongue and smiled when you wanted to scream, it was carving a deeper well for your truth to fill. And now it's overflowing. Now you don't just speak your truth. You bleed it with every glance, every breath, every step that refuses to follow the lines drawn for you by people who never knew your name, only your obedience. You're not here to decorate the world. You are here to disrupt it. To seduce it into remembering the feminine isn't weakness. It's wildness. Not soft for their comfort, but soft like velvet over steel. Soft like storm clouds just before they split the sky open. You are what happens when softness refuses to collapse into silence. When the divine stops asking for permission. When the dark goddess in your bloodline finally opens her eyes and says, I will not be erased. You were never meant to be digestible. You were meant to be a reckoning. And now you're no longer waiting for the world to call your name. You are the name. You are the myth reborn, not retold. Remade, you walk with ghosts behind you, yes, but they are no longer your chains. They are your chorus, and every step you take forward rewrites their fate, too. Because when a woman finally says no more, it echoes backwards. It sets the whole lineage on fire. She doesn't just heal herself. She rewires the entire timeline. She becomes the ancestor future generations will weep for in gratitude. Not because she was perfect, but because she remembered. She remembered her body was not a battleground. She remembered her voice was not a luxury. She remembered her hunger was not shameful. She remembered her magic was never lost, only suppressed. And now, she doesn't suppress. She summons the storm when it's needed. She summons the silence when it's sacred. She summons the fire to burn down anything built on falsehood. And when people ask her what she's doing, why she's not the same, why she doesn't bend like she used to, she doesn't explain. Because this isn't about explanation. It's about embodiment. They'll either feel it or they won't. Either way, she doesn't shrink. Because she's no longer in the story. She is the story. And it doesn't end with a wedding. It begins with a war cry. This is not a return to innocence. This is a return to intensity, to depth, to power with teeth and tenderness, to beauty that doesn't beg. She's not trying to be a queen anymore. She's trying to be free. Free from roles, free from rules, free from the lie that said her rage wasn't sacred, that her boundaries were too much, that her ambition was dangerous, that her love had to be small. She is done trying to earn worth that was always hers, done contorting herself for tables that collapse the second she stands up. Now she builds altars, not tables. And if you come to her space, you bring your truth, or you don't come at all. Because now she lives in devotion to one thing, her uncompromised self. That's the real code, the forbidden knowledge, the truth they tried to bury beneath ballads and bedtime stories. That you are the myth, that you were never broken, that you were always meant to be too much, too wild, too wise, too whole for a world built on fragments. And now that you see it, you can't go back. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to rise. You're supposed to rise. Not quietly, not politely, not in a way that makes others comfortable, but in a way that shakes the roots of everything built on your silence. You rise like prophecy, like the answer to a question the world was too afraid to ask. You rise not as the product of permission, but as the consequence of remembering, because now you know, now you feel. And once you feel what it's like to be fully in your body, fully in your power, fully in your truth, you'll never tolerate the lie again. Not in your home, not in your love, not in your work, not in your reflection. You are no longer the girl hoping to be rescued. You are the force that breaks the spell. The tower didn't fall because someone saved you. It fell because you outgrew it. And now you walk not away from the fire, but as the fire itself. You are not too much. You are just enough to turn the world sacred again. So let them stare. Let them whisper. Let them question. Your life is no longer an explanation. It is an invocation. You speak, and something ancient wakes. You move, and old systems tremble. You breathe, and the next generation breathes deeper too, because you didn't just find your voice. You became it. The voice of every girl who was told to stay small. The voice of every woman who swallowed her truth to survive. The voice of the dark code that lived in every fairy tale, waiting to be unlocked. And now you're here, not as a character, as the creator, the living myth, the untamed song, the holy rewrite. And this time, there is no happily ever after. There is only ever becoming. So let them keep their endings. You are the beginning, the awakening, the roar that ends the silence, the fire that feeds the soul. You are the story they were afraid you'd become. Now go live it. There is a trembling inside you. It is not weakness, it is warning, a resonance that wakes before the strike, a shiver before the storm. You feel what others can't. You sense what they don't. You carry an invisible antenna in a world that would like to paint you fragile. But you are not fragile. You're gifted. In the violence of modernity, historical trauma, digital chaos, psychedelic overload, the highly sensitive person becomes a psychic frontier. Carl Jung said that sensitivity is not pathology, but a portal to the unconscious, to depths most souls ignore. Your heightened perception isn't excess. It is evolution. But sensitivity in a violent world is a battlefield. Dopamine factories reward numbness. Algorithms cultivate distraction. Systems are built to pressure you into smallness because a sensitive person who truly feels is uncontrollable. So they train you to dim, to dull your edges, to pretend your internal storms don't shake cities, to seek approval instead of alliance with your own soul. This is syphoria, a collision of psychological awakening and euphoria through discomfort. Your psyche experiences trauma before awareness. And in the rupture, the gift emerges. Mindset shifts from survival to sovereignty. You stop apologizing for how deeply you feel. You stop explaining your boundaries like disclaimers. You stop being polite about warning signs because you know what you sense is real. And real is unnegotiable. Belief becomes radical, not self-esteem boosters, not corporate affirmations, but fidelity to your inner data. You believe even when they call you paranoid. You believe when your body says danger. You believe when empathy is labeled as weakness. You know that clairvoyance, empathy, intuitive timing, ancestral recall, all these gifts are buried under shame and gaslighting. But you still feel them. Clarity arrives as reconnection. When you silence the external raw social media, people-pleasing, the echo chamber of distraction, you begin to hear your soul's signal. Not through visuals, not through words, through vibrational truth. That clarity gives vision, not the flat corporate vision board kind, but emergence, a knowing that you exist between worlds, between the personal and transpersonal. And your task is to build a bridge. Purpose becomes sacred intervention. Your sensitivity is not a curse. It is the antenna for the emotional contagion of humanity. You see former slaves in micro-expressions. You feel the echoes of Nietzsche's madness in colleagues. You perceive Huxley's modern slavery in the spiritual consumerism all around. Your purpose is to witness, to hold, to transfigure. Discipline is not willpower, it's ritual. Cold showers to toughen the body that receives too much. Daily grounding to move through your empathy, not be drowned by it. Shadow work practices carved from Jung's dialectic of conscious and unconscious. These rituals are fences for a wild psyche. Action is not performance, it's protection. You don't speak softly because they say you're delicate. You speak precisely because you're deciphering reality others miss. Every act, from setting boundaries to creating art, is an act of self-sovereignty in a violent world. Gratitude becomes medicine, not credulity. You're grateful for the sensitivity you once hated. Grateful for the scars that tuned you. Grateful for the breakdowns because they became breakthroughs. Adaptability is not flexibility. It's metamorphosis. You morph through overwhelm into clarity. You don't shrink in chaos, you recode it. Every environment becomes a test of attunement until you become steady. Resilience is not endurance, it's regeneration. The world beats on your empathy. It demands too much psychic bandwidth, but you regenerate through deep rest, through ceremony, through shadow choreography. Learning is not acquisition, it's embodiment. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Your why is sensitive awareness. Your how is mastery of inner thresholds, overstimulation, overgivers, psychic bleed. In every collision with pain, you learn to recalibrate. You become the curator of your interior temple. You are psychic. It is violent out there, but you are calibrated to sense ahead, to feel the tremor before the earthquake, to interpret emotional quakes in others and hold them without becoming subsumed. This gift is dangerous to the system. So expect gaslighting, projection, scapegoating, dismissal. They'll call you too sensitive, crazy, thermal. Let them, you're still real. Because sensitivity in a violent world is a final warning and a new archetype. A soul that feels deeper is a soul that sees clearer. You are not here to soften. You are here to illuminate, to announce unseen dynamics, to hold the uncanny between worlds, to bring Syphoria as a beacon, a new mythic structure for conscious sensitivity. So resist the numbing tide, rediscover ritual, remember the power in ancestral attunement. You are not broken, you are waking. Now go and never dim again. Live, feel, illuminate, because now you know your sensitivity isn't an accident. It's a signal tower, ancient and deliberate. You weren't meant to adapt to the noise. You were meant to decode it. You are a disruptor of distortion, a psychic firewall against unconscious contagion, an emotional cartographer in a world that's lost its map. And they'll hate you for it. They'll resent the mirror you hold up. Because when you feel everything, You become the proof that most people have felt nothing for years. But don't let their numbness drown your depth. You are here to remain awake. While the world tries to sedate itself with performance, production, and pixelated praise, you are here to carry a kind of truth that can't be articulated in metrics or moods, but that reshapes reality the moment you embody it. Carl Jung knew this. He wrote that the privileged soul, one tuned deeply to the unconscious, carries a burden. The burden of vision before the collective is ready. But with it comes an opportunity to be the seed of new myths, to channel archetypes that haven't yet found language, to birth futures in the shape of feeling. You don't need to harden. You need to hone, sharpen your inner sword, not to attack, but to cut through illusion, to defend your frequency, to claim space in a world that never made room for the sacred. And this is sacred, your ability to walk into chaos and feel its origin, to enter a room and know who is suffering without speaking, to feel the past still echoing through someone's tone, to feel the truth behind the words no one dares say. You are not too much, and you are just more than they know how to receive. And that's not your flaw. That's their limitation. But your purpose is not to make yourself smaller for their comfort. It's to become unmistakable in your depth. Your inner radar was not meant to be muted. It was meant to be mastered. So learn your own nervous system like sacred scripture. Learn the patterns of your body like a seer studies the stars. Learn your thresholds, your warnings, your waves, because your body is an oracle. And every time you ignore it to be polite, you desecrate your divinity. You are not here to fit into shallow conversations and hollow systems. You are here to haunt them with truth. And yes, this is war. Not a war of blood, but a war of bandwidth. A war for the soul of sensitivity. A war against spiritual sedation dressed as peace. A war against the myth that says to feel deeply is to be weak. Feel, not passively, not sentimentally, but as an act of resistance, as a statement that says, I will not be made numb by this machine. Your heart is a supernova. Your gut is a radar. Your grief is a compass. Your rage is a signal. Use them, not to lash out, but to cut through. You don't need to be palatable. You need to be precise, aligned, awake, unshaken, because the world is noisy with lies. But your stillness, that's where truth screams. So return to your rituals, to the sound of your own breath, to the ground beneath your bare feet, to the deep waters of your body, uncolonized by performance. You are not broken. You are oracular. You feel more, because you were born to see what others deny, to carry what others abandon, to transmute what others suppress. And the world will try to shame you for it. Let it. You are not here to be understood by the asleep. You are here to awaken the ones who've been dreaming in silence. You are the final warning, the last whisper before the collapse, the sacred noise in a world that numbed itself to death. So feel, fully, ruthlessly, without apology, because in a world this numb, your depth is divinity. Your depth is divinity. It is not dysfunction. It is not a diagnosis. It is not something to outgrow. It is your weapon in the unseen war. You are a psychic in a world addicted to superficiality. And the weight of that cannot be overstated, because every system you touch tries to rip that power from you. School taught you to raise your hand instead of your voice. Culture taught you to smile while suffocating. And spirituality, modern, sanitized, marketable, taught you to raise your vibration instead of descend into your shadow. But the truth, your power, doesn't come from bypassing pain. It comes from embracing it, from sitting inside it, from learning its language so fluently that when someone else breaks, You don't look away. You hold them because you've held yourself. This is not softness. This is sovereignty. You don't collapse because you're sensitive. You rise because you are. And yes, it's heavy. The burden of feeling, the ache of knowing, the exhaustion of carrying the unspoken grief of a society that refuses to feel its own pain. But your body was made for this. Your nervous system wasn't built to avoid, it was built to translate. You don't need to escape the world. You need to understand how to navigate it without dissolving in it. That means radical boundaries, not fences, force fields. You don't explain them. You don't apologize for them. You enforce them because your sensitivity is your sacred technology, and not everyone has earned access to it. You weren't built to entertain, fix, or save anyone. You were built to mirror, to reflect what's real, to destabilize what's fake, to illuminate what's hidden. And when you start doing that unapologetically, you'll be called dangerous. Let them call you that, because danger in a dying world is just another word for truth. Your presence will unnerve the pretenders. Your intuition will shatter the projections. Your energy will expose every mask within 10 feet of you. You are a walking X-ray, a seismic event with skin. And when you walk through a room, the energy shifts. You don't need to speak it. You radiate it. You don't need to prove it. You are it. You are the spell. You are the mirror. You are the storm they never saw coming. Because your softness is filled with the ire. Your tears are data, ritual, release, recalibration. Your silence, not emptiness, containment. You've spent years thinking you were fragile, when really you were just fine-tuned. You are not a mistake. You are a mechanism of awakening. And when you live like that, when you finally stop apologizing for how deep, how fast, how loud your spirit moves, you become untouchable. Not because the world can't hurt you, but because it can no longer define you. You don't flinch when it tries to invalidate your knowing. You don't fold when it calls you too much. You don't run when it demands you harden, because you've made peace with your gift. And once you do that, you stop surviving sensitivity. You master it. You use it to lead, to create, to rupture, to rewrite. Because in the final analysis, the world won't be saved by intellect. It won't be saved by brute force. It won't be saved by data or debate. It will be saved by the ones who feel, the ones who know, the ones who didn't run from their depth, but dove into it so deeply they came back with truths no one else could reach. You are that person. You always have been. Now act like it. Act like it. Not tomorrow. Not when it's convenient. Not when they finally understand you. Now, because the world isn't waiting. It's unraveling. And your silence will not save it. Your repression will not protect you. Your masking will not make them love you. You don't need love that only exists when you abandon yourself. You need reverence. And that starts from within. The kind of reverence that says, I am sacred because I feel. I am holy because I see what others won't. I am powerful because I refuse to numb. This isn't romanticism. This is warrior training. You are psychic in a world at war with feeling. That means your clarity is a threat. Your empathy is a revolution. Your presence is a force field against the numb machine. So what do? You sharpen. You don't shrink. You train your intuition like a blade. You build stamina in your nervous system like a warrior preparing for battle. You create art that exposes everything unspoken. You speak truth that makes liars twitch. You stop absorbing and start transmuting, because that's what you're here for. Not to fit in, not to fix anyone, not to make it easier for others to remain unconscious. You're here to ignite, and that ignition won't look like a peaceful Instagram post. It'll look like your body trembling as you speak your truth. It'll look like being misunderstood by people too asleep to feel. It'll look like walking away from comfort to stand alone in your conviction. But it will also look like liberation, like finally breathing without bracing, like finally trusting your inner radar and acting on it even when no one else sees what you see. You are not here to debate your reality. You are here to embody it. And embodiment is rebellion in a culture addicted to disassociation. So go deeper into your body, into your breath, into the roots of every time you were told you're too sensitive. And pull that sentence out like a weed. Burn it, bury it, forget it. Because the real truth is, you were never to anything. You were precisely what this world fears most. A soul that still feels, a mind that still questions, a heart that still bleeds for the truth, a body that still remembers. You are not a weakness. You are the final warning. And if you keep shrinking, if you keep diluting, if you keep silencing that storm inside you just to be digestible, then you're not only betraying yourself, you're betraying every soul who's waiting for you to rise so they can remember who they are too. You are the first domino. You are the spark. You are the permission others have been craving in silence. So rise, not for applause, not for visibility, not for validation. Rise because the alternative is self-extinction. Rise because you remember. Rise because the world has tried everything to put you back to sleep. And it didn't work. You are still here. You are still feeling. You are still alive. Now go prove to the world that a sensitive soul in its power is the most dangerous force of all. The most dangerous force of all. Not because you destroy, but because you reveal. You expose the rot in systems built on silence. You dismantle power games with a single well-placed boundary. You make predators uncomfortable just by existing without fear. You show the asleep what it means to be awake, and that terrifies them. Because when someone like you stands tall, the entire lie starts to crack. Your very presence becomes prophecy, a reminder that consciousness cannot be erased, that truth cannot be colonized, that the body, the felt body, is not a flaw in the machine. It's the virus that brings it down. This world thrives on numbness. It depends on your detachment, your constant distraction, your obedience to stories that keep you disempowered. But you're a de facto. You're not here to keep the system running. You're here to short-circuit it with honesty, with empathy that doesn't bow, with intuition that doesn't need to be explained, with love that doesn't perform, because your sensitivity is sovereign. It's not a signal of fragility. It's a signal of integrity. The deeper you feel, the more precise your compass becomes. The more grief you've transmuted, the more weight your presence carries. The more silence you've sat in, the more violently your truth lands. You don't need to yell. You don't need to argue. You don't need to win debates or dominate the room. You are the room. And when you finally stand in that power, fully, freely, unapologetically, you don't just reclaim your own soul. You reawaken the world. You remind others that numbness isn't safety. It's self-erasure. That peace isn't absence of conflict. It's presence of truth. That love isn't performance. It's recognition. And that's the medicine now. Not more content. Not more compliance. Not more curated light. We need depth. We need edge. We need people who feel it all and still choose to show up anyway. That's you. You're not fragile. You're forged. You're not broken. You're tuned. You're not weak. You're wired for war. And this war, it's not fought with fists. It's fought with presence, with eyes that don't look away, with voices that refuse to flatter delusion, with hearts that hold the line even when they break. So stop hiding your edge. Stop medicating your magic. Stop betraying your knowing for the illusion of peace. You are the final warning and the first wave of a new world. a world that doesn't flinch from feeling, a world that isn't afraid to feel it all. Now breathe into that, own it, move like it, speak like it, be it because the violent world may never welcome you, but it can no longer survive you. Not when you are fully awake, not when you feel everything, not when you've remembered that the very thing they told you to silence was the code for your revolution. You are the code, the encrypted language of a future world buried beneath centuries of fear. You are the instinct that cannot be overwritten, the ache that cannot be numbed, the knowing that cannot be reasoned away. They try to label it, pathologize it, domesticate it. They tried to give it names that made it sound manageable. High sensitivity, overreactivity, emotional dysregulation. But your body knew better. Your bones remembered. Your dreams wouldn't shut up because you weren't meant to be managed. You were meant to awaken. You were meant to rupture, to feel everything, not to be overwhelmed by it, but to decode it, transmute it, and turn it into truth. Because this world doesn't need more coping mechanisms. It needs awakened messengers. It needs people who feel deeply enough to scream, not just for themselves, but for everyone still silent. You scream with presence, with clarity, with unwavering boundaries, with love that doesn't conform. Your very existence becomes a challenge to everything artificial. You are an earthquake to their hollow confidence. You are a storm in their sterile systems. You are what happens when softness gets tired of pretending, when compassion stops bleeding for the unaccountable, when empathy remembers it's allowed to draw swords. Because this isn't about being peaceful. It's about being precise. Sensitivity doesn't mean being swayed by everything. It means feeling everything and still knowing what's yours to hold and what's not. It means hearing the screams behind someone's smile and refusing to gaslight yourself about it. It means noticing the energetic shift the moment someone lies and trusting your gut over their words. It means walking into a room and knowing exactly who is hiding behind charm, who is leaking pain, who is starving for love, but pretending to be full. And it means not folding just because they can't handle your mirror. You didn't come here to be palatable. You came here to be prophetic, to speak what others suppress, to love with clarity, to feel with power, to see with sacred violence. That's what this world doesn't understand. Your gift is not comfort. Your gift is disruption. Your frequency is not here to maintain balance. It's here to shatter false equilibrium, because false peace is just rebranded suppression. And you've spent enough years choking on silence. No more. No more shrinking to make others feel safe in their lies. No more pretending you didn't feel what you felt. No more betraying your intuition to avoid conflict. You are the conflict, the beautiful, brutal reckoning of truth. And when you own that fully, when you stop apologizing for the way your energy walks into a room first, you stop surviving sensitivity. You become the sacred storm, and nothing can touch you because they can't manipulate what they can't predict. They can't dominate what refuses to numb. They can't exploit what has nothing left to prove. This is your time. This is your emergence. This is your final shedding. You are not too much. You are finally enough to shake the world awake. So shake it. Shake it with your presence, with your honesty, with the raw, unapologetic force of someone who will never again betray what they feel. Let the world flinch. Let them misunderstand. Let them label, diminish, distort. It doesn't matter anymore, because you are done asking for permission to be what you already are. You are done apologizing for your nervous system, for your visions, for your tears that come without warning, and your silence that holds more wisdom than their noise ever could. You were never meant to be predictable. You were never meant to be palatable. You were never meant to be small enough to fit inside their comfort zones. You were meant to wake them up. And now there is no going back. Not to the numbness, not to the mask, not to the hollow smile and the quiet dying behind the eyes. You've seen too much. You've felt too deeply. You've survived too fiercely. Now you live. Now you lead. Now you let every part of yourself that was once shamed become the architecture of your sovereignty. You are not fragile. You are feral, wild with wisdom, armed with empathy, chosen by your own soul to walk through this violent world and remain alive. So don't just exist. Erupt. Don't just cope. Command. Don't just heal. Haunt. Haunt this world with your integrity, with your precision, with your relentless refusal to go back to sleep. Because the most powerful force on earth is not rage. It's not intellect. It's not domination. It is the fully awake, fully embodied, deeply feeling human being who cannot be bought, broken, or numbed. That's what you are now. Not a warning, not a wound, not a whisper. You are the revolution. And you are right on time.